but it is a gift received when we come to him. So rock to living, malleable clay, if you will, for the potter to use, salvation. Then we covered a hazier word, sanctification. Oh, here we get into churchy words. No, please understand, these are words God uses. You go into Scripture, you will see the word salvation. You will see the word sanctification. If you don't understand the words, guess what? You don't understand God. And if you don't understand God, how can you make sense of when he heals or if he will heal? So sanctification, there are once again bundles of concepts, profound concepts. I could say, what is sanctification? And somebody who's been doing a little reading might pop up and say, well, that's when you're set aside for a holy purpose. And that would be correct. That's one view, that's one angle. There's a whole bunch of other things, but we looked at the verse here. If you want to look for what's the purpose ultimately always comes down to this: to be conformed into the image of his Son. Everything God is doing in setting you aside is to be conformed to the image of his Son. Is sanctification a process? Yes. We go through it step by step. Is sanctification something that just happens as a gift? Yes, it's that too, that being put aside. How is it a gift? Well, how we understood it was this way. If God puts pressure on you and life puts pressure on you, it can just and send you in every direction, and you're just this distorted mold from life. Or if you have a casting, a mold in which to form the boundaries, in which to scope you. And that's where we talked about then this living clay becomes the image, where the gift is the mold. The mold is Christ. Christ is the mold to which we are formed, that we be conformed to the image of his Son. It is all about that, sanctification, salvation. In themselves, it brings us to, we said there was 4 pillars, the fourfold gospel we were looking at. Salvation, okay, makes sense. So, sanctification, yeah, I got to be saved to be sanctified. How can you fit into a mold before you're living clay? Makes sense, they're together. And now we hit the third one, healing. And it was a beautiful thing as we hear a testimony of it. Even in the testimony, the healing in itself can't be taken out of context. The thing that Joe brought in was the fact that there was a message to be shared. There was a purpose to the healing. Here we find our common ground. Purpose in the healing. What is the purpose in the healing? Well, the purpose in the healing is this: to be conformed into the image of God, into the image of his Son. That is what it is. There is the purpose. What's the message? Anything that allows people, drives people to, causes them to be conformed to the image of his Son. It all comes down to the image of the Son. Does God still heal today? Well, apparently so. I at least know one man who believes it, who's experienced it. I would add a few more reasons. There are the documented cases. I'm sure we can go and look up Joe's records and see what happened. Another thing I want to bring for your inspiration, your edification in all of this, is there is a book that is out of print, and it was very hard to find, but I finally found a link on Amazon. It's a book called Healing Voices, and it's a little book that was put out by the Christian Missionary Alliance quite a while back now. It's kind of the 40s, 50s, in that area. Still a good read. You can pick it up for a penny on Amazon if you wish. You can find the link on the Learn More page on the website. And as it was pointed out, yes, $7 shipping probably, but hey, you get a good book for $7.01. So, but there's something worth looking at. The other thing I believe there's still healing in this day is because nowhere does God imply it ever stopped. There is, at the end of Revelation, we have this, the word is a closed word. There's no more to be added or taken away. We have that. But nothing is ever implied about healing. Nowhere does it say healing is only for the biblical, the church of the Bible times. It never, as a matter of fact, it goes as far to give us a protocol on how to approach for healing ourselves. So everything implies that healing still goes on. The point is, though, is that that healing goes on in context to salvation and sanctification. It's a big question. Why does Joe get healed and yet someone else doesn't? How is it that it seems God answers this request but doesn't answer that request? Everyone in this room has thought that. You may be varied it in a different way on how you were asked, but we've all been there. Why? How does God heal? What is the constant when it comes to healing? What is the constant that's in there? We say, well, maybe it's faith. No, not really. Faith is involved, but if we were to read through the Bible stories, in one case, somebody's healed. They didn't even know they were being prayed for, and yet they're healed, so their faith didn't come into the picture. In some cases, there was not healing, and faith is mentioned. In other cases, it's not mentioned at all, so faith isn't quite it. Their good character, their morality. No, that doesn't seem to be the case. We talked about the man at the tombs. He was possessed by a legion of demons. I don't think he was morally all that pure. So these things aren't constant, but is there at least something when we talk of healing that we can always grasp as the anchor to say this is always the principle involved in this, and we can see it biblically? I would propose to you that we already covered it, but we wouldn't know it unless we went back and started in core doctrine. Something missing in the modern church today is the idea there are core doctrines to be understood. Salvation being one, sanctification being one. Little story on how this fits in. When I was experimenting with this cast molding for sanctification the other week, and I was sanctifying my dough here, and I was doing it, one time I didn't get it quite right, and I pulled it up, and I left a big old tear in the image like that. And it raised a really profound theological question to me. How does God deal with tears in the image? Because the truth is, we all have them. We all have some form of tear. Yeah, even the best of us, man, God's pressing us into that mold of His, and we're conforming, we're doing our best to surrender to the will and to the image of Christ, and yet we still got the tears. And some of them are pretty deep. For example, some of us are still have tears of pride all through our image. And it can be so subtle. We might be that person that, I pride myself at being a very moral and good person. And you wouldn't even maybe so much admit it to yourself, but you see yourself a cut above everyone else. And maybe judgment comes into it and different things like that. For some people, you're doing well. You are a passionate person, and man, you just have passion for Christ, but passion has more than one side, and anger is a problem with you. You just losing your temper, and man, you've really, Joe talked about the Beatitudes and being the witness. Well, sometimes you weren't such a good witness because of the flaws, the tears in your image. We could mention a whole bunch of things, but here we are. God's working with us. The destiny is to be conformed to His image. And what does God do with the tears in the image? Well, let's back up a little bit on all of this and look at the analogy of thing. When we're referred to as clay and He's the potter, we're not talking as so much the outer essence, but the inner essence. Right? So as I hold up this dough, this isn't, when I look at you, this isn't so much what I'm seeing. Hopefully this is emanating out of you, but this is what you are inside. The clay is what you are inside. If we were actually to add to the analogy, what we would find is that maybe we could add this. And because all of us has this. There's the inner self. There's the outer self. For some of us, it literally is a mask. For some of us, whatever we are inside, we hide it really well. But we all have this. We all have a physical presence. Peter referred to it as the tent. And we know a lot of things about this. It's temporary. It'll disappear in time, and this is what will be left. This is the big thing we're dealing with. But this is here. Does God care about this? Well, sure He does, because He created it. He gave you your body. He knows how your health is. He knows what it is to suffer physically. He was a high priest, our high priest. He is someone we can identify with in all manners of what it is to live in this. But here we are. Question then becomes, When he's conforming to the image, what's the main overriding principle here? This or this? Well, it's this. He cares about this, and that darn elastic's going to get me sooner or later. But this is what really matters. What is he going to do about the tears in this? Sometimes, God has to tear this to get at this. We won't listen until he does. That pride or that anger or whatever it might be, that distraction, we won't listen. So he will allow this to be torn. He might even tear it himself if that's what he has to do to get at this, to mend the tears. On the other hand, perhaps you know someone, and keep in mind as we're talking about this, we're not talking about God healing and through natural means. We're talking about divine supernatural healing. And if we look in Scripture, most, if not all, the healing deals with someone associated with believers, either the believer himself or someone under the influence of the believer, or someone who's in the believer's life. So it deals with those who are in contact with Christ. Christ tears believers. He will tear this. But there are times, too, where believers, the tear in this is actually tearing this as well. Maybe you've been there. Maybe you know someone. Is that the strains that are going on? Yes, God says he won't give us more than we can bear and have a way of escape and all that. But sometimes it seems the tears in this are dissolving that image. And you wonder why. Well, see, maybe that's where faith comes in, because there are points where maybe sometimes people won't surrender at all because they don't expect God to be healing in any respect. So different things can happen there. Bottom line we're getting at is this. Does God heal? Yes. Does God not heal? Yes, he'll do that too. Why? One constant, no matter what you say, no matter what it is, no matter what the situation, it's for a purpose, yes it is. And the purpose, even though the details may change, the purpose is always, always the same. To conform you to the image of Christ. This inner clay we're talking about, it's to mend the tears. It's to heal this. To conform you to the image of Christ. That's what it's all about.